Hello and welcome back to another episode of the very best dog training podcast you've ever listened to in your life. I hope you've had a fabulous week. I hope the weather's been bloody gorgeous. I hope the dogs have been behaving themselves. I hope all is just generally well in your world this week. I cannot believe we are in July already. How in God's good name has that happened? I don't know where 2025 has gone. I know everybody says that. I know all old people say that. It makes me feel old saying that. How are you getting on with the goals that you set yourself for this year with your dog? Did you even set any? I have to say, I feel like we've been doing amazingly well with our outdoor adventuring, and I have made a real effort since early spring this year to get in loads of like woodland walks and riverside walks and loads of off-lead exploring and freedom and all that juicy stuff, but haven't really done anywhere near as much of the brain fun freestyle stuff that I would like. But then I think that ends up being a bit more of a winter thing for us when, you don't want to be out in the mud so much. Well, you certainly don't want to be out in the mud if you own a white poodle. Anyway, Jesus Christ, that is literally half a day's work right there. So we end up doing like a lot more trick training indoors in the winter. But I do wish we had done more. I mean, don't get me wrong, we are doing it every week. We do a little bit every week, but I think that I think about doing it a lot more than I actually do it. I must try harder. Anyway, we are not here to lament the loss of half of 2025. No, we're not. We are here this week to talk about dog training and specifically to explore the mechanics of it in a bit more detail and do a bit of a deep dive into how learning actually works in dogs. Because if you've ever felt baffled because your dog did it perfectly yesterday and now today it's like they've never heard the word sit in their life, you are very much not alone. And this episode is absolutely for you. We are going to peel back the curtain a bit on like the juicy science behind learning, talk about the real world reasons why your dog might know something in one context but seem to totally forget it in another. And we've all been there. And most importantly, I'm going to give you some practical ways, as I always try to do, to work with your dog's brain, not against it, so that learning becomes smoother, faster, and way more enjoyable for both of you. So let's start with this. When we say learning, what do we actually mean? Well, in simple terms, learning is essentially when a change in behavior happens based on experience. It's how your dog figures out what gets them food, what gets them freedom, what gets them in trouble, and what keeps them safe. And that learning happens literally all the time. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Whether you are actively training your dog or not, they are learning. If you are not teaching them, the environment is teaching them. If you turn this podcast off now and you only remember one thing, I'm totally cool with it being that, okay? But don't, because there is more to be learned. So there are 3 big concepts I want to explore in this episode, because I think afterwards you're going to be able to take this knowledge away and chuck it straight into the dog training you're already doing and see improvements. And these 3 things are timing, feedback loops, and habit formation. So let's dive into the first one, timing. If there is one thing that makes or breaks training outcomes, it's timing. And it's the thing that so many owners get wrong completely accidentally. And it's the thing that will bugger up whatever they're trying to teach. And they have no idea why their dog is just not getting it. So in your dog's brain, there's this constant processing of events and outcomes. I sat and then I got a biscuit. I barked at the Amazon guy and the Amazon guy left. I pulled on the lead and I got to move forward, and so on and so on. The reinforcement, whether it's food or movement or attention or anything else your dog values, has to happen immediately after the behavior in order for the dog to connect the dots. And by immediate, we are literally talking less than a second. Anything longer, and the dog genuinely may link that reward to something else entirely. So to give a very real example that happens all the time, If your dog sits, you've asked them to sit and they've parked their bum on the floor, and you spend 5 seconds then fumbling in your treat pouch, they might start sniffing at the floor, or they might break that sit and just take a step towards you, or they might get frustrated and let out a bark. And then the treat appears and you stick it in the sharp end of the dog. And that last behavior that they did is what gets reinforced. This is why so many trainers, myself included, use marker words or clickers, because they act like a timestamp in your communication with your dog. Think of it like you are taking a screenshot of the exact moment your dog does something that you want to reinforce. So let's say you are teaching your dog to lie down. Your dog begins to lower into the down position, but the actual moment that their front elbows hit the floor is the specific behavior you want to reinforce. That's the down position. That's the gold. If you were to fumble around for a treat and you only manage to deliver it 2 or 3 seconds later, you might accidentally reinforce what your dog is doing in that later moment, like standing back up or looking away or jumping or barking or whatever it is. But when you use a clicker, or you say a clear, crisp yes as a marker word, the instant those elbows touch the ground, you are saying that right there, that moment, that is what I love. That is what is getting you the good stuff. That is what you should repeat. It gives your dog really precise, clear feedback. And when dogs get clear feedback, learning becomes so much faster, so much easier, and so much less confusing for them. Can something be much less confusing? Yes, it can. It can be much less confusing. Let's go with that. So here's what's wild. Research in both animal training and human learning shows that the closer in time that feedback is to the behavior, the more effectively it builds the behavior. So this is written in science. This is fact, okay? I'm not making this shit up. Even a 1 second delay can weaken that connection. So having a marker literally bridges that tiny but really, really critical gap between behavior and reward. Now, here's something you can actually try, and I really recommend actually doing this as a little game, okay? Grab a clicker or decide on what your marker word is going to be, something short, sharp, and consistent, like yes or good. Just pick one word, stick with that word, because consistency is queen here, okay? Now, watch your dog, and the moment they do anything you like it could be that they just turn and look at you, or they sit down, they offer you some eye contact, or they're walking nicely by your side, click or mark that behavior, and then reach into your pocket and reward them with a treat. Now, at first, your timing might feel a bit off. You might miss the exact moment. That's okay. Your timing only improves with practice, and you'll start to notice how much sharper your eye becomes for those little behaviors. And your dog, they will start learning faster. They will get better at offering behaviors. They will become more confident because they're getting much clearer information and feedback from you. One of the beautiful things about markers is they literally remove the lag. You are no longer desperately trying to jam your hand into a treat pouch in time to reward a behavior. You're just saying, yes, that thing. And your dog starts to learn over time that when I hear that specific sound, I know good stuff is coming. That sound becomes meaningful. It becomes a secondary reinforcer, kind of like the cha-ching of a cash register, right? It means something valuable has just happened and something valuable is about to follow. And here's a cool little fact. Research shows that predictability of reward is what makes reinforcement effective. It's not necessarily the speed of delivery. As long as the marker was timed well, so your yes or your click, that becomes a promise. You are saying that was the right move. You have earned something awesome. So, in short, a clicker or a marker word is the glue between behavior and reinforcement. It builds clarity, it builds speed, and it will bring confidence to your training. It's a total game changer. If you're not doing it already, I highly recommend you give it a go. And this is where feedback loops come into play, because every time we mark and reward a behavior, we're creating a loop of information that helps our dog learn what works. So let's unpack how that loop works and why it's the key to building lasting behaviors. Because I told you the second thing we were going to talk about is feedback loops, didn't I? So behavior doesn't happen in isolation. It's always part of a loop. And you can think of it like this. We start with the cue, then behavior happens, then there's a consequence, and the result is a change in future behavior. So let's say, again, you say sit. Your dog sits and you give them a treat. The cue, when you said sit, triggered a behavior, which was their bum hitting the floor, which resulted in a consequence, yummy food, which then feeds back into the loop and makes it more likely they're going to do that again next time. But here's the kicker, the consequence can be anything. If your dog jumps up and you laugh, or you push them off, or you squeal, or you look at them, that is still a consequence. It's maybe not the one you intended, but that there is another feedback loop nonetheless. And this is why consistency is such a big deal, because your dog is constantly collecting data. What works? What gets results? What gets me the good stuff? At the end of the day, dogs really aren't stubborn. They're strategic. They're constantly weighing up what's worth doing. If jumping up sometimes gets them attention and sitting sometimes gets a treat, they'll try both. They'll just hedge their bets. And this is where I see so many dog owners fall into frustration. The dog sits sometimes, ignores the cue other times, and everyone's a bit confused. But once you zoom out and look at the feedback loop, you can start to troubleshoot. Was the behavior reinforced last time? Was the reinforcement powerful enough? Was there an accidental reinforcement of something else? Were the cues clear and consistent? Dogs don't generalize well either, which brings me to a critical little side point. Just because your dog knows how to sit in the kitchen, it doesn't mean they'll sit in the park or at the vet or when you're holding a shopping bag and yelling over the wind. You have to train in multiple environments and re-establish the feedback loops in each one. It's not that your dog is being difficult, they just need help connecting the dots again in that new context. Okay, now let's move into habit formation. This is where things start to get juicy, because once you understand that learning is really just creating habits, predictable behavioral patterns, then training becomes less about obedience and more about building a lifestyle. Your dog does what they do most often, full stop. That's ultimately it. They pull on lead because that's what they've practiced most. They bark at the window because that's what's worked in the past. They sit politely for food because that's what has consistently gotten them results so far. Habits are built through repetition, reinforcement, and emotional state. And I want to repeat that last bit, right? Emotional state, because your dog is feeling their way through the world. And if the emotion associated with a behavior is fear or frustration or hyperarousal, that will impact how that habit forms as well. If you teach a behavior in a calm, predictable setting, say teaching recall in a hallway, and you layer that with positive reinforcement and success, your dog starts to build a happy, confident association, right? But if you try to teach recall by calling them out of high arousal dog play at the park and it doesn't work, and you shout and they ignore you, and then they finally come back and you're annoyed, well, they're not forming a helpful habit there. That's not learning, that's just confusion. So, how do we actually build good habits? Well, we break behavior into small chunks, we reinforce the hell out of them, and we practice them in multiple contexts. We train when the dog is calm and when the dog is excited and happy. We train at home, in the garden, on the street, at the park. We keep the emotion positive. We reduce the chance of failure. We avoid flooding. We plan sessions like a coach would plan an athlete's practice, intentional, focused, and appropriate for the level they're at. You are not just teaching a dog to sit, you are building a habit of sitting when cued across locations with distractions while feeling safe, while feeling confident and totally clear about what earns reinforcement. So I've talked about quite a few things in one go there. So let's wrap up with some really useful, hopefully, takeaways for you. So, number one, your dog is always learning. So set up their environment so that the right behaviors get reinforced, even when you're not actively training. Number two, use marker cues. So get really sharp with your timing so your dog knows exactly what earned the reward. Number three, look at the feedback loops. If a behavior is happening, it's being reinforced somewhere. So get curious, not cross, because ultimately this will get you to a resolution quicker, I promise you. Number four, practice. Don't just expect. Thinking your dog knows it doesn't mean it's a strong habit. If it's not rehearsed, it won't be reliable. So practice, practice, practice. Number five, emotional state matters. Learning sticks best when dogs are calm and confident. Don't expect high performance in high stress. This is why when we are working with reactive dogs, there are multiple streams of training we have to work through. Yes, we need to teach them the correct behaviors like disengagement, owner focus, but then beside that, we also need to grow their ability to cope with arousal, to grow their confidence so the stress levels come down and we can ensure that behavior is actually able to happen even when their triggers are present. If you have a reactive dog, there's a full day by day, exercise by exercise training pack on my website, listendogtraining.com. You can go and check it out. You can download it and you can literally get to work today if you want to. Okay, and lastly, be patient. Your dog isn't a robot. They are a living being with emotions, instincts, and a whole brain of their own. But with the right timing, the right loops, and the right habits, they can become incredibly consistent, happy little learners. All right, I think I have probably waffled on for long enough. So I really hope you found this podcast episode helpful. If you did have any amazing aha moments, or you've got an idea for something you're going to try, or there is a little change you're going to make, I would love for you to let me know what resonated. You can DM me, you can tag me on Instagram, I'm at Listen Dog Training, or you can even drop a review on the podcast itself. It makes my day. Truly, truly, truly it does. And if you want to really level up your understanding of dog training, especially around building solid engagement and connection, don't forget my 21-day engagement training course is live on the website and people are really enjoying the daily challenges and tutorials. It is totally self-paced, practical. It's packed with everything we've talked about today, applied in real life training. So that's it for now. Go and enjoy the rest of your walk and give your dog a treat just because. And I will see you next week for another episode of The Walk and Talk.